Hi, and welcome to my sewing room. My name's Leah, and I'm on week 20 of my UFO challenge, where I've challenged myself to sew at least 15 minutes a day on my UFOs. This past week, I feel like I'm on the home stretch to finish up my Pastel Dredsen quilt. When I left you last week, all I had left was to finish sewing the rows, stitch down one more Dresden plate, and add the borders. Well, I got a lot of progress done. I did get all the rows sewn, and that took me way longer than I thought it would. For some reason, I always think it's going to be super fast to start zipping those rows together, but it always ends up taking longer than I thought. I spent 30 minutes on Friday and a whole hour on Saturday just to get all the rows together. That's probably because I like to pin and press and pin and press, which adds a little bit more time, but it gives me a nice crisp finished quilt top. Well, I got those finished, and I sewed down my last Dresden block onto its back. Once I got the rows sewn together, it was on to borders. Again, I always think those are going to be fast. Just cut them out and sew them on, right? Well, it took me about 15 minutes to add each side of my pink border. And that's where I'm at now. I have the entire top together and one inner border. After playing around with my options, I decided to go with a pink inner border and then a wide purple border. The problem is I need about 2 yards of fabric to get a really wide purple border. And I don't have enough yardage in any of the purples that I bought to get all the way around on a border. Another thing I was thinking about is this quilt is already big with just the pink inner border. It's already almost 90 inches long, which is plenty long for a twin bed. So do I even add the purple border and go bigger, or do I just leave it with the pink? So here I am with a border dilemma. Normally this dilemma would make this go back into the UFO pile and make it sit until I decided I want to think about what I want to do with it. But because of this challenge, I had to come up with a decision. I don't want this going back on the shelf to sit for a couple more years. I want to get this one done and on top of a bed for somebody to use. By the time I had got to this border dilemma, I still had one day of sewing left. I still had Tuesday where I needed to come up with 15 more minutes to sew. And to keep up with the challenge to sew at least 15 minutes a day, I decided to pull out my Blooms for Annabelle project again. It's times like this when I'm glad I have labeled and organized my project. When I opened the box for Blooms for Annabelle, I knew exactly where I was and I knew exactly how to get started, which saved me a lot of time. I saw all my rows in orders with labels, and I knew all I had to do was start sewing my columns together to create some rows. So I worked on that for 15 minutes and got some of my rows growing. Since I had just finished my video on web chain piecing, I decided to go ahead and use that technique to help keep things organized in case I had to put it back into the box again. So between working on my Pastel Dredsen and that extra day of working on my Blooms for Annabelle, I reached my goal of sewing at least 15 minutes a day on my UFOs. So this leads me to the goal for next week. Again, I don't think I'll get enough fabric in time to even work on this one next week. So I'm going to keep working on my Blooms for Annabelle. But in the meantime, what do you think? Should I go ahead and add that purple border? I was thinking about 6 inches, and that'll put the length of the quilt about 96 inches long and make the quilt even bigger. Or do you think I should just go ahead and keep the pink border and just leave it like that? I mean, it's a thinner pink border. Then I can go ahead and start working on making the backing and get it on the quilt frame. I even have enough pink fabric left over to use as a binding to match. But what do you think? Pink border all by itself? Or pink and add the purple? Let me know in the comments below what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for following along. Until next time, happy sewing.